session. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The meeting and members. The meeting is now resumed and is in public session. So I'll just wait until the broadcasting is returned. Can I remind members to turn off their mobile phones completely as they interfere with recording equipment. Before we commence our main business, I'll turn to correspondence. 2018-352, letter dated 6th of November from the Taxi Dispatch Operators Representative Association stating that TDORA would like to make a presentation to the Joint Committee to brief members of the Committee on the extraordinary changes that have taken place in provision of taxi-type services worldwide, to show why significant changes are needed to the Taxi Regulations Act 2013 and to outline changes in regulations that they would like to see. I suppose consider this as part of our work programme. Agreed? Agreed. Correspondence 2018-353, emails 9th November, 18 Fallon, Clerk of Joint Committee on Children, concerning the launch of a report on tackling childhood obesity, being held on Thursday the 15th of November, 10 a.m. Members may wish to attend. If they do, that's fine. Correspondence 2018-354, email 9th of November from Michelle Carpenter concerning possible upcoming committee meeting in Cork, organised by our Vice Chair at the National Rowing Centre. And when we visit Cork, which hopefully will be soon, we'll make sure that happens. Correspondence 2018-355 from Hugh Quegan, NTA, concerning Phase 1 of the Bus Connect's Core Bus Corridors project and the publication of the emerging preferred routes for 4 of the 16 previously announced routes. There was a briefing this morning to inform members, and that's, hopefully we'll have a hearing down the road, whatever the members wish. National Sports Policy 2018-2027. The purpose today is to consider National Sports Policy 2018-27. I would like to welcome Mr. Shane Ross, Minister for Transport, and Mr. Brendan Griffin, Minister of State at the Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport, with special responsibility for tourism and sport, and the officials who are present. Before we start, I have to read the privileged commentary here. Before we commence, for the purpose of officials attending, I'm required to read the following by virtue of Section 17.2.1 of the Defamation Act 2009. Witnesses are protected by absolute privilege irrespective of the evidence you are to give to the committee. However, if you are directed to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and you continue to do so, you are entitled thereafter onto a qualified privilege. In respect to your evidence, you are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise or make charge against any person or persons or entity by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. Members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that members should not comment on, criticise or make charge against either a person outside the Houses or an official, either by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. I now invite Mr. Shane Ross, Minister of Transport, Tourism and Sport, to make his opening statement, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I would like to thank the committee for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm joined on my left by Minister of State Brendan Griffin, with responsibility for tourism and sport. I'm also joined by officials of the Department, Ken Spratt, Peter Hogan, Noel Sheehan and James Lavelle. I propose, with your permission, Chairman, to share my speaking time with my colleague, Minister Brendan Griffin. Brendan and I had the privilege of launching the National Sports Policy towards the end of July at a wonderful venue in central Dublin, specifically at the Lawrence O'Toole Recreation Centre in Sheriff Street. That day, in Sheriff Street, many people came together to showcase the best of the North East inner city community, as local people of all ages participated in a variety of sporting activities on a gloriously sunny day. In so many ways, it was the perfect start for this 10-year policy. I wish to extend my thanks once again to all concerned. There are 3 high-level goals in the national sports policy. Increased participation across all sports in Ireland, more excellence in terms of governance as well as in the sporting arena, and improved capacity to allow for more people to get involved in sport and for those already engaged in sport to improve standards across the board. Our ultimate ambition is for every citizen to engage regularly in some form of sport and physical activity, irrespective of their background or their physical capabilities. We want to raise Ireland to the top of the table for participation. To achieve the aims of the policy, it is clear that we must prioritise certain groups to help them to engage more in sport and be more physically active generally. The committee members know, as well as I do, the extraordinary benefits this can deliver for people's physical health and mental well-being. When we launched the policy, we highlighted a number of priorities, such as the need to accelerate our Women in Sport programme by doubling the annual funding provision from 1 million to 2 million in 2019. While the gender gap in sports participation is narrower now than at any point over the past 10 years, at just 4.5%, I'm determined to eliminate that gap altogether. I'm very pleased that the necessary funding is in place to begin that journey in 2019. Many of the great Irish sporting successes this year have been achieved by women, and the list of achievements over the past 12 months has been phenomenal. To name but a few, we've been enthralled by brilliant moments such as the remarkable run of the women's hockey team to the World Cup final, the World Under-20 Athletics Championship successes for Summer Leckie, and the women's 4x100 metre relay squad, the Under-18 European Championship medals for Rashida Adelecki, Sarah Healy and Sophie O'Sullivan, and our medal wins at the World Para-Athletics European Championships and the World Para-Swimming Alliance European Championships, which were hosted here in Dublin during August. Our Paralympic sports stars provide a welcome illustration of another area of priority, which is to provide increased opportunities for people with a disability to participate in sport. To drive this initiative, funding has been provided in the 2019 estimates to introduce a dedicated 1 million programme for disability sport, which will facilitate the deployment of a sport inclusion disability officer in all 26 local sports partnerships countrywide. We have set ourselves a number of ambitious targets, and I'd like to highlight the following today. To increase overall participation in sport from 43% to 50% of the population by 2027. That means the equivalent of 250,000 more people participating in sport in 9 years' time. More targeted high-performance funding to deliver more Olympic and Paralympic medals. 20 medals is our target for the Los Angeles Games in 2028. The adoption by all funded sports bodies of the government's code for the community, voluntary and charity sector. I'd like to reiterate my thanks to John Tracy and all at Sport Ireland for their commitment to Irish sport. They have, for example, shown great leadership in the fight against doping and are leading the call for reform in the World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA. At the recent anti-doping summit in the White House, the high regard in which John and his team at Sport Ireland are held among their peers was abundantly clear. We will never tolerate anything which compromises the integrity of our sports, and that message is emphasised in this policy. We're also determined to continue our investment in sports facilities through the Sports Capital Programme and the new large-scale Sports Infrastructure Fund. The ongoing development of the Sport Ireland National Sports Campus is proof that Ireland is committed to excellence and opportunity in sport. In conclusion, this is an historic document that for the first time outlines the government's vision for sport and reminds us all of the importance it has in our heritage and in our culture. We want to ensure sport remains at the heart of our society. And even more importantly, we want to see Irish people of all abilities taking part in some sport or physical activity each day for the benefit of their physical and mental health. Thank you, Chairman. And I'd now like to ask the Minister of State to comment on policy.
Thank you. You're very welcome, Minister of State.
Thank you, Chairman. As Minister Ross has just outlined, the publication of the National Sports Policy 2018 to 2027 outlines how strongly this government recognises the value of sport to our nation. I know from first-hand experience how playing sport is positively associated with better educational performance and provides young people with life skills such as goal setting, self-improvement, social skills, working in a team or on your own to achieve something personally rewarding. Sport can teach us so much about the value of commitment to a worthwhile objective, discipline and so many other personal skills. It is clear how much Irish society has benefited from the contribution of sports clubs and volunteers in our towns and villages. These selfless individuals provide so many people with an outlet to express themselves through sport. A fantastic aspect of sport is that you can have a lifelong relationship with it, whether it is as a participant, coach, administrator, volunteer or supporter, and it is especially pleasing to note that we are seeing so many people staying active for longer. The contribution of sport and physical activity to our country is significant. Its contribution to tackling the challenge of obesity and sedentary lifestyles is critical to maintaining a healthy population. We all benefit when our citizens spend more time off the couch and spend that time in the gym, going for a walk or cycle, or getting out in the playing field. The consultation process which preceded the publication of the National Sports Policy reiterated how much credit is due to the national governing bodies of sport, the local sports partnerships and other sporting organisations for promoting sport in Ireland. The policy takes account of that extraordinary contribution and presents a vision for sport in 2027 that is based on inspiration for our young people, involvement and enjoyment by participants and spectators, and excellence from our high-performance athletes. The policy contains 57 actions and is backed up with an envisaged doubling of state investment in sport to 220 million in 2027. The Government recognises the scale of the challenge we face and is committed to increasing support to achieve our shared ambition. Minister Ross and I made the case very, very strongly for an increase in the 2019 estimates, and we have made a really good start that has been widely welcomed by the sports sector. Minister Ross and I have worked closely on the make-up of the Sports Leadership Group, which is to be co-chaired by us, and we are excited by that group being put in place. The ambitions within the policy are significant, and they will require a lot of work to achieve them. But it has been clear from the launch of the policy that the sporting community in this country is eager to see those targets met. That is very heartening and encouraging. I want to continue to see Irish sportsmen and women inspiring the next generation to follow in their footsteps. Whether it's at club or county level in Gaelic games, national teams performing in World Cups, European Championships and across the international arena, or athletes across all disciplines competing with the very best in the Olympics and Paralympics, there is nothing more uplifting than seeing our own sporting heroes representing us with the eyes of the world watching. We know that to keep on inspiring our young people, we need to do all we can to help our high-performance sports people prepare to the same level as their rivals. Increasing the level of our high-performance investment is essential, and I have stated my aim to triple the level of financial support to around 30 million over the next decade. The availability of quality sports facilities also has a big impact on raising performance standards. We continue to invest significant resources through the Sports Capital Programme, as well as the new large-scale Sporting Infrastructure Fund. The latest round of the Sports Capital Fund just closed for applications. We received 2,337 applications again, which is a record, emphasising how important the scheme is for clubs and communities throughout the country. The Sport Ireland National Sports Campus is also going to be further developed. Finally, I would like to endorse Minister Ross's observations about the sterling work of John Tracy, Kieran Mulvey and all in Sport Ireland for ensuring that Ireland's sporting sector continues to develop, and especially on leading the fight for a clean sporting landscape internationally, while still providing opportunities for all citizens of Ireland to get active and get involved in sport. Thank you, Chair.
Senator Manley.
Okay, thanks, Chair, and thank you to Minister Ross and Minister Griffin for coming before us and with the presentation. And I think particular compliments on the fact that you have actually published a sports policy. I'm not sure when it was done before or whatever, but it certainly was needed, and I think to plan a pathway forward for sport in Ireland is hugely important, and the targets that you're talking about and the benefits of sport, both I suppose with elite sport to lift the spirit of a nation, and we, as the Minister has referred to, we've seen it with the hockey achievements of the hockey team and rugby and all of that over the years, is hugely important, and the target to increase participation is absolutely crucial to run that parallel to the support for the elite sport, because while the elite sport can lift a nation, the increased participation can make us a healthier nation, and I think that's really important. Just a few points. Obviously, we're just after the launch of a report on disability and access to transport. Minister, you took part in that as well, and I suppose in any respect this sports policy is aspirational too. And it is, I suppose, the success of it will depend on how it's implemented over the years. Just a couple of questions on it. You mentioned, or the word targeted funding is where, targeting sports that we have a better chance of being successful at. We all know the examples recently of the rowing, the hockey, and so on. I just want to know how that's. Are we going to target sports that we have a better chance of winning medals at, or are we targeting at investing in sport, the high-profile sports that we haven't been successful at? How does that take place? I mean, is it up to governing bodies to come in and make an argument with, or a presentation to the Sports Council and say, look, we can win 3 or 4 Olympic medals in this if we get the funding? And then we'll say a few years ago, because of the success of our boxers, there was large funding for the boxers. Obviously, that wasn't a success, or was disappointing in the last Olympics. So, does the funding disappear when the medals disappear? If you know what I'm trying to say here, and because sometimes sports need the help, maybe when they aren't successful, to get up to that level. So I just wonder how does that work through the system, in the sense of I suppose the connection between the Sports Council and the governing bodies. The other thing that's mentioned is inequalities in sport, and obviously a big issue at the minute is women in sport. And obviously, in recent times, I think there's a big effort from within governing bodies to promote women in sport, and rightly so. I happen to be a member of a committee in the ladies Gaelic football at the minute, which is from trying to produce leaders within that organisation, if you like. At the ladies All-Ireland finals, we see the 2 teams, but often, most of the time, it's the referees are male, the managers are male, and all of that. So there's a big need to, if you like, change that and to achieve the potential of women in sport to its full extent. And I'm glad to see you mentioned there, maybe you might just expand on it a little bit, about the increase of the funding, I think this year, from 1 million to 2 million for the annual Women in Sport programme. So you might just maybe explain that a little bit as well. There are just a few points that I want to make on it, so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, and I welcome the warm messages to Minister Ross and Minister Griffin, and accompanied by their officials. And of course, Minister, we were all delighted last July for the launch of the sports policy document in central Dublin, and it's a welcome document. As indicated, it was 10 years since we previously had a policy document launch towards our sports programme, and it has to be welcome. But I suppose, like other being said already, we hope it's not just an aspiration. Documents, can be put in shelves, but I'm hoping, and I hope that we don't just have to depend on knee-jerk reactions when, for example, our ladies hockey team did well in the world stage. That Minister was able to find money straight away to progress their sport and other Olympic sports, and hopefully sport for the rest of the athletes. But instead of Minister, board ministers, that the questions I would be asking, is obviously to get this programme and policy implemented properly, money is the big question, and we see you set a target of doubling the funding from 111 million to 220 million. And the question I would be asking, to implement the policy document, when can we see the target spending being achieved? Like, will that come before the 10-year period? Like, there will 111 million. I know it'll increase in increments, but will the increments be in a 5-year period, 7-year period, or a 10-year period? Because otherwise, we will not see the programme implemented fully. Another concern, Chairman, would be in regards the delivery of the programme. And while there's mention of, and Mr. Griffin touched on 57 specific areas, actions largely around increasing participation, which is important for all types of sport. And I suppose when I say all types of sport, obviously high performance is the one that everyone looks at and comes across on TV, and that's the one the following morning we say we want to get involved in. But we have the various sports codes, be it both team and individual. Schools, of course, have to be looked at in regards ensure that students of all ages are involved. Recreational activities for those who can't do active participation. And we must not lose sight of participation of people with disability. And, just an hour ago, we actually launched the Disability and Transport Access Programme, and it's a case about, when can we deliver these programmes on time and within schedule. But what I'm trying to say here, Chairman, is the fact that there's so many targets, and how does the Minister see himself, his people following his footsteps, that what time frames for each target, and the money will be the big thing, that we welcome the whole funding and commitment, but you can't have a programme implemented without, obviously, money is the backbone of any project. And I must thank also, the various government bodies, as mentioned, Sport Ireland, Federation of Ireland Sport, and of course, we must not lose sight of the revamped Olympic Council of Ireland, which is now the Olympic Federation of Ireland. They've made great strides since we had the debacle in Rio, and hopefully that this will all work hand in hand. And when I ask about the money being spent straight away, and I know the Minister, and he was running recently in America on the issue about anti-doping programs, that I see he's already committing straight away to the money to that project, right? So straight away, the money to active participation is that guaranteed. What he mentions, the money to sport overall, initial emphasis is on anti-doping, which will be commended, but straight away are we at a deficit in activating the overall participation programme. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Deputy Troy.
Thank you very much. And can I thank the two ministers and their officials for coming before the committee today. And I have to say I welcome the publication of the Sports Policy 2018-2027. I think it's very important that we do have a clear roadmap in place in terms of how we want to see sports develop and grow over the next decade. So that's welcome. One of the points you made is one of the three keys, I suppose, if I take them in that area, is number one is to increase overall participation in sport, 43% to 50% by 2027. And in that area, I want to focus on minority sports and how we're going to increase participation across minority sports. And I think, Minister, what we need to see is more proactive support to this sector, as opposed to reactive, as we have been in the past. We need to target where the help is needed now. And I suppose, Minister, if gold medals were being given out for people's ability to run to the podium and jump on a bandwagon, well then, Minister, you would have won a gold medal in relation to your handling of the...
The gold medal would go to the late Charlie Hoy, I think. I don't think you can beat that. Well, he used the government jet to fly to Paris.
I can tell you that the Minister certainly gave him a run for his money in relation to the support for our women's hockey team. And you alluded to it in your address, and it's somehow you feel that there's some... You hope maybe to garner some of their goodwill and from their success. But the fact of the matter is that hockey team pulled themselves up by their bootlaces to achieve what they achieved. And we're reacting in terms of the support, and it's welcome, by all means, it's welcome to be supporting that team now. But the support wasn't there when it was needed in its infancy. And I think that's what we need to be focusing on this policy document, is to ensure that the support is there when needed. Not when there's cameras, not when there's publicity, but you need to be ensuring that in the quietness, out of public glare, that the necessary supports are put in place to ensure that we do see an increase in participation. Can I say, in relation to, I suppose, when you look at sport in our schools, and yesterday, as it happened, Irish rugby star Louise Galvin is quoted in the Irish Independent as saying, in relation to the curbs that are on playground games, as well as limited or no PE sessions, can leave many children at risk of not meeting the recommended 60 minutes exercise a day. Often it's the PE hall in the school that's the first to go if there's a concert or an exam going on. Ms Galvin, who's a qualified physiotherapist, is now doing a Masters in Sports and Exercise Medicine in the University of Ulster, said parents could think of basic ways to get their children active at home. She's an ambassador for the Irish Society of Chartered Physiotherapists. She said children learn a lot from sport, especially when it comes to making mistakes and dealing with disappointment. They learn that it's okay to fail. Sport gives more balance to young people's lives and has huge concentration benefits for study. Girls in sport have better self-images and more confidence, she said. I think that sums it up well. And the question I'd ask, Minister, in terms of, as you were aware, many local authorities, the length and breadth of this country, are picking up the tab, or partially picking up the tab, to pay for development officers in their particular municipal area. I know in Westmeath we partly fund development officers in GEA, in rugby. I know from talking to some of my colleagues that's extended into cricket and other areas. And are you happy, I suppose, that local authorities are funding this? It's welcome that they are, but it's not really the ideal funding stream in terms of funding development officers. And the other half of it is being funded by the sporting bodies itself. Obesity is possibly, for Ireland, one of the biggest challenges in our younger people, and how we get and encourage greater participation in sports is so important. I think it's, and it's quoted in that article yesterday as well, is the building of fostering the culture of competitiveness from an early age. It ensures that people realise that it's okay to fail in sports, but it's also so important to be competitive. And if we don't foster competitiveness at an early age, well then, how are we going to achieve our targets in terms of the targets you've set down in relation to Olympic medals at our Olympics? If you look at New Zealand, and we're often compared to New Zealand, and I suppose the reason we're compared to New Zealand is because of we're similar in size, we're similar in terms of our population size, but they're far exceeding beating us in terms of their achievement in the sporting field. And I suppose they do foster a culture of competitivenely. And I suppose the question I'd ask in relation to that is, have we a clear plan in terms of how we can achieve our target in relation to Olympic medals? Are we going to focus on a number of key supports where we feel that we have the most realistic chance, or how do you envisage that target being achieved? You mentioned both ministers in relation to the quality of our sporting facilities, and our sports capital programme has to be acknowledged for the success that it is. Can I ask, when will the large-scale sports infrastructure fund finally be opened. As a result of parliamentary questions, it's been opened very shortly for months now. So I'm just wondering, would it be possible for the Minister to actually give a clear time frame as to when this will be open? Because there are many sporting bodies out there awaiting the opening of this fund. And finally, one of your key targets is the adoption by all funded sports body of the governance code for community, voluntary and charity sector. And I think that's critically important in light of what happened at the Rio Olympics and what transpired at the Olympic Council of Ireland. Do we know what percentage of our sporting bodies would meet the governance code currently? Or is there a large body of work to be done to bring the sporting bodies up to a standard where they would fulfil the governance code? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Court Minister.
Just a couple of questions, Minister. The first one was you recognised the need, you identified the need rather for increasing participation, and I'm just wondering what exact actions have you planned and what areas or groups, etc., do you feel you've identified that need that specific targeting for increased participation? I also just wanted to raise the issue now that the sports capital grant has been annualised, and it was my understanding you're to have a review of that. And I'm just talking in light of the bit of a fiasco last year in relation to allocations. Have you identified anything in relation to bringing in improvements in the way the grant allocations are given? We've seen, have you identified that maybe disadvantaged areas with the least facilities could be, a percentage of the grant allocation be ring-fenced specifically for those areas that are at a disadvantage because they have less facilities than others and less funding, etc. Particularly in light if you're going to, you're seeking to improve or increase participation. It's made all the bit harder if you don't have the facilities or resources in your locality. But just there was another question. It's just my own curiosity. I just wanted to know who was on the sports leadership group, and was it yourself, Minister, and Minister of State there that chose the members of the group? Sinead Cahirrick.
Okay, just Minister, I'm sorry, I take Senator Fegan now, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. I think most people have said what I want to say already. Look, this is very, very welcome, a national sports policy, and I think the goals, the increased participation across all sports in Ireland. I think we used to have many years ago soccer, and it was participation through fun, and I think once you get people participating, it's wonderful. Just one thing, the more excellent in terms of governments as well as sporting arena, but I think we're working pretty close. One thing that, the remarkable run, as you said, the women's hockey team to the World Cup final, and again I highlight it again, it's one thing that when I look at all the various sports that we seem to not, I suppose, avail of, and I know it's not your problem, but it's something that I wanted to work on. And it was an All-Ireland hockey team playing in the Commonwealth Games last year. We didn't get the buy-in from a lot of the various organisations, effectively politically and I suppose nationally. And why I say this is that if we really are to compete, the Commonwealth Games is every 4 years, and it competes at the same time every 2 years from the Olympic Games. And I really think if we want our athletes, and what's happening in the national sports arena is incredible, but it's an extra venue, it's an extra goal to work towards. And I know it's not your situation, but it's a political thing. But it's not really political. The Commonwealth Games has 52 countries, 32 republics, there's 2.4 billion. And I really think that our enhanced participation, our observers would actually ensure that athletes in the Republic would have the same chances as people in Northern Ireland and in the United Kingdom. So it's just something, maybe look for your views. I know it's quite controversial, but I think we're beginning to come of age. What has happened last Sunday in the after the DECA commemorations, the centenary of the armistice, I think we've come an awful long way. Also, I just want to say regarding the Sports Capital Fund, I'm absolutely amazed to see that there's still 2,337 applications, because I would have thought after 15 or 20 years that a lot of the sports organisations they've built so many floodlights and they've built so many pitches and second pitches and training grounds and dressing rooms. But it is a great sign that obviously we're not just talking about the 3 or 4 core sports. There's a lot of other sports that are seeking funding. So I'd like to see what exactly have we reached out to a lot of other sports around the country, and I call them minority sports. Thank you.
Thank the members for the contributions. And just before the Minister responds, I'd just like to make a few points, if I may. I welcome the significant funding that is being provided for sport in this programme. I think it's hugely important, and the key point which we must never forget is the health gain to people, particularly people who don't participate in sport throughout their lives. It is absolutely huge, and the increase in longevity, the avoidance of heart disease and other issues are at the core, I think, of our public health policy, and at the core of giving everybody an equal chance to live to the best of their ability. I would agree with Deputy Munster in her comments on disadvantaged areas about a significant proportion of funding to be allocated absolutely for disadvantaged communities. I know you have mentioned it there in your actual document, but I think we need that positive discrimination. And the other point I think is, regardless of how great they are and the people at the top in any sport, be it GAA, soccer, rugby, whatever, there are very, very few people who will actually ever attain that or ever have the potential to attain it. So I think it's equally important to put a great and even greater emphasis on inclusivity, on involvement in as young as possible of young people, and as regards the facilities that they use. Because John or Mary going to school, even in primary school, I think that Minister Griffin there knows about, I think you're talking about the activities, is it the 2-mile run or whatever it is? Pardon me, yes. I think that's a very good idea, and those sort of activities are hugely important to develop, obviously, healthier population. The other question I have is in relation to older people. As people age, sometimes they get grey hair and things like that, but while their brains don't atrophy, the bodies get slower. So I would ask a Minister that, I know it's mentioned in the National Sports Strategy, but I think we need a greater awareness or greater inclusiveness of involving older people who may not be involved. Obviously, they won't be involved in soccer and Gaelic or rugby the way they used to be. But I think we need a proactive policy. I think some of the ideas are like the park run or the park walk, about your 2K, 5K, whatever it is, that we need maybe to think in connection perhaps with the Department of Health or the Sports Council to have, to have a greater emphasis on including older people and activities that older people can easily get involved in. So I would very much welcome that. The last point I have to make is just, I don't know if Deputy Munster has to go as well, but I'll have to go at about 2:40. There's a topical issue dealing with an issue that I'd have to go. So I'll ask Deputy Keefe at 2:40 to take the chair if we're not finished by then. I apologise in advance for having to go to that.
Chairman, can I ask Deputy Griffin to start off, and I'll follow up on
yeah.
each question.
I'll start with Senator O'Mahony, and thank you, Senator, for your comments. And first of all, I just want to thank the members of the committee who were at the launch actually in July as well. It was quite a successful launch, and the document was very well received. And of course, it's now up to all of us to implement it and to collaborate to ensure that we get everything that's in here implemented. And in answering Senator O'Mahony's question, it is actually the first full comprehensive sports policy that we've had in the country. We've had different papers previously, but nothing as comprehensive as this, nothing with as much consultation and as much feedback from the key stakeholders. So I think it is a watershed moment for Irish sports, and it's a case now of making sure that we implement everything that we state we want to achieve in here by 2027. Just in relation to the high performance element, so on page 56 of the document, we have a very detailed outline of what our strategy is there in relation to high performance. And I know what you're asking, Senator, is it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, you know. If you don't put the money in, that sport has less likelihood of being near to success. So it is a difficult one. It is ultimately one for Sport Ireland to administer. The key thing is that a new strategy is being implemented in relation and being put together in relation to high performance. So a new working group has been established in relation to that, and that is something that will, throughout 2019, be working on a strategy that will present its final report roughly this time next year, hopefully maybe even a little bit earlier, with a view to setting out a 12-year plan, which will be reviewed every 4 years in line with the Olympic cycle. And that is how we're hoping to do it. And again, the decisions, the micro decisions will be made there by Sport Ireland, who have an excellent record in terms of high performance and providing for our athletes. And you know, you would be familiar with the campus and with, you know, the high performance unit out there as well, and the work that they're doing there. They're really doing great work there. So what we're trying to do on the capital front is to enhance that side of the house in terms of improved facilities through the development of the campus. In relation to the Women in Sports programme, it was very positive to see the doubling of funding there up to €2 million. And again, that funding is distributed to the national governing bodies of sport as well for the types of programmes that we know are targeting women who you know, currently maybe aren't participating, or who are, you know, not as active as they would like to be in sport as well. And again, Sport Ireland distributes that funding to the national governing bodies, who then implement those programmes on the ground. And it is something that, because of the increase in the funding we've been able to get in the budget, that we're able to do. And I think there's really positive results come out of that programme. And it's one that hopefully, as we continue, we'll be able to see further increases in that regard. Just to say that, you know, when we set the target to move from 111 million to 220 million by 2027, so that effectively that was over 9 budgets, it would have required a budgetary increase of 12 million in the 2019 budget on top of what was there in 2017. Thankfully, we've been able to secure over the 14 months between the budget and the end of 2019 an increase of 16.5 million. 15 million of that is in respect of 2019. So we're actually ahead of target. If you were to purely look at that target in a linear sense, and if you were to look at reaching that 220 mark in a purely linear way over 9 budgets, the increase would have to be roughly 12 million per annum. So for 2019 we have 15 million. So we're off to a very good start in relation to matching what's in here with the funding required. And that's something obviously that we need to keep going every year. But, you know, this document, I think, it would be no good without the funding to match it. It's quite as simple as that. But that's not the only thing. Having the funding is one thing. Now we need all the players, all the stakeholders to get together and to ensure that they all play their part, and that's what the implementation group is about, the leadership group is about. So maybe Minister Ross wants to take up on some of the other issues from Senator O'Mahony, and I can get to the other answers then.
Yeah, fine. I'll just add a couple of things to that. Senator O'Mahony, yeah, you addressed the issue of participation and how it was so important to the health of the nation. Yeah, I think the figure at the moment is only 43% are actually participating fully now, and we want to get that up to 50%. And the question is how we're going to do it and which groups that we actually target. I don't know whether you're aware, you probably are, that it's only, I think, 23 or 24% of people who have disabilities who are actually participating properly in sport, and we aim to certainly target them and other disadvantaged people in a very energetic way. One of the ways we're going to do it with disability people is the introduction of a national network of sports inclusion disability officers aligned to local sports partnerships. And I think these officers obviously will be expected to work closely with relevant national government bodies, with the disability sector, with leisure providers, with the Cara Centre and other stakeholders in providing opportunities for people with disabilities to take part in sport. We've also, as I think the Minister of State mentioned, we've also increased funding there as well. You mentioned the targeting certain sports, and I think one of the others, I think Deputy Senator Fiona, I think, mentioned as well, whether Sport Ireland is going to in terms of high performance, going to target those with the best chance of medals. Yeah, I think that is the suggestion at the moment. That is the aim at the moment. I think that there is a prevailing view that maybe the funds were too well spread, and that maybe we would be better off targeting those with medals. I think Deputy Troy referred to the with best chances of medals to New Zealand, where they have a similar population and they have a medal hit rate which is much better than ours. And whereas medals, as I think you emphasised in your own contribution, are not the be-all and end-all, and participation is equally important, if not more important, and in my view it's certainly equally important. It is important to young people who look on these icons as an example to see that we're successful in terms of winning medals, and that of course makes them participate in sport. Was there anything else? I think we have a Sports Inclusion Disability Fund, of course, which will be targeted at the disabled. We're also obviously going to encourage women in sport, which is where we double the funding.
Just the final point, you know, the increased participation, obviously the PE in schools at the minute. I was just wondering, is there much cross-departmental, you know, obviously if PE is implemented right across the board in sport in schools, that would increase participation because it would be a vehicle to get that done. I just was wondering, are you working with the Department of Education?
Yes, we are. One of the things is that the Department of Education will be one of the, we've identified as one of the key stakeholders in terms of implementing the sports policy, so they will be sitting on the sports leadership group and will be represented there. And I think that's really important. There will be that interaction, not just with the Department of Education, but with other departments as well, like health, for example, children. But the other side of it is that you know, we have the Sports Capital Programme as well, which has been altered this year now to make it more accessible for schools. So that's something that there were some bureaucratic blocks there previously that made it more difficult for schools to apply and to be valid. So that is something that we have freed up in the 2018 round.
They had to combine with the club locally, was it? Or?
Yeah, there were issues as well with title that were always difficult to get through the validation process. So we've tried to rectify a lot of that, and there has been a lot of engagement with the Department of Education. And outside of the sports policy process, we've also been meeting with previously Minister Bruton, just in terms of seeing what can we do in relation specifically to the Sports Capital Programme in the future to try to roll out better sporting facilities to where the children are, which is in the schools, where you have literally a captive audience for a number of hours every day. But also, you know, how we've been exploring, could we collaborate better between two departments to facilitate the PE curriculum as well? Because there's a massive cost for any one department to take on in relation to the capital requirements related to, for example, PE. And at the same time, you know, if there can be a broader community benefit from the implementation of facilities to facilitate the PE curriculum, then, you know, that's something that we feel that we're interested in seeing how can we help there. So that is going on, and I think it's again across all government departments. I think, you know, for example, in health and children and in rural community, you know, there is a role to be played here. So we're trying to interact as much as we can with other government departments. Deputy O'Keefe, I think I probably answered the budgetary questions, I suppose, that you've asked there in depth in relation to the figures there that we've got. And I'm very much aware of that fact that we're going to have to keep fighting this fight every year to keep in line and to keep up with the requirements to reach that target. But as I said, we're off to a very good start, and we didn't commit to a linear increase, you know, per annum, but, you know, we've surpassed that already. If we were looking at a straight line between 2017 and 2027. So I'm very anxious that we would not just reach that target, but that we'd ultimately beat it, hopefully. But we're going well at the moment, so that doesn't mean, though, that we can take it easy in the next budget. I want to see more money coming into sport as quickly as possible, because it is money that's really, really well spent. There isn't a cent that goes into sport that's not well spent. I think there's a massive return for the exchequer, for overall society, and it's not sports is expenditure. I see it very much as investment, and it definitely comes back.
Sorry, the policy for 10 years, but what would be your preferred time frame? You know, if you had your way.
Well, look,
I know you don't straight away, but
yeah, I mean, we have to be realistic too. I mean, you know, 2027 is the target to reach 220. You know, if we can reach it before then, that's great. But we have set a target, a realistic target, based on all of the information and projections and everything available to us. As we know, you know, things happen, events happen, but this is very much based on, you know, on our best possible outlook and the most realistic outlook for the future. Again, if it can be done sooner than that, I mean, if we have an opportunity to do that sooner, absolutely we'll take it. But, you know, there are massive competing demands, of course, across government, as we know. But that is something that, you know, I would see certainly that target is what we would see as the minimum. In relation to Deputy Troy's questions there, oh, sorry,
Just coming, Deputy Keeves. Do you mind?
No,
is that
absolutely.
right? Just a couple of points so that we can deal with yours all together. Yeah, the knee-jerk reaction to hockey, which you said.
pick up on this?
You know, Deputy Keeves, what we wanted to do was to recognise what they'd done. You'd have been the first person, if we hadn't done anything to recognise their achievement, to say, where was the minister, what was he doing, that these poor unfortunate hockey players weren't given any money, and look what they achieved. I mean, you can't have it both ways. They did it.
It took you 24 hours to clarify where it came from.
Sorry, all right. What we did was recognise a minority of sport in a very, very concrete way. And we continue to do that where it's necessary. You know, sometimes you don't spot them coming all the way, but they deserved support, not just with the presence of government ministers over there, but also in terms of money and funding for the Olympics. And I just say to you that it wasn't quite a knee-jerk reaction just in terms of hockey. When we allotted that funding, simultaneously we gave money to others. We gave to sailing, we gave to rowing, and others who had a good chance and needed it to go to the Olympics, and they needed funding for that. So it wasn't just hockey, but I must say this: I'm very pleased with the fact that we were able to find the funds to do this, and I wish the hockey players well in their endeavours. They've done the nation very, very proud, and you'd be the first to criticise one if we didn't recognise it, and you'd be absolutely right about that. Okay. Fine.
Yeah, very good. Deputy Troy, thank you, Deputy Troy, for your questions. I think the funding side of things there I've covered off, I think. And just in relation, now I haven't got to read Louise Galvin's piece yet, but I do want to see that. But I suppose, look, what I would say in relation to, you know, schools, I've touched on it already, you know, we are trying to see how can we work better with education to try to see what type of maybe a synergy we could get going there in relation to capital provision and how that can benefit wider communities. Also, you know, programmes like the Daily Mile I think are really important. Athletics Ireland have been to the fore in that with Sport Ireland and rolling that out in schools. I think things like that are very important, and you don't necessarily need major capital investment to see it happening. I'd like to see the Dolly Mile kicking in here as well in this institution. I think it would be something that we could help do, and I think it would help perhaps inspire other workplaces to do it as well. We're very good at telling kids that they need to be active and they need to be doing sport and they need to be doing all these different things, but we're not so good at maybe following through in them ourselves. So that's something that's
that culture will,
that's the thing.
Into adulthood.
The likelihood is from all studies that if you develop a good habit at an early age, that you will keep doing it. And I know as someone who runs marathons, you'd know this. You know, the huge benefits. We don't have to go into that area. The massive benefits of sport across the boards for everybody at all ages, not just for children. Just in relation to the national governing bodies and in relation to the development officers, one of the positive things that came from this budget is that for the national governing bodies of sport, their core funding we've been able to increase across the board by about 2 million, which is very important for those national governing bodies, but also that's on top of the Women in Sport programme initiative increase. So this money will allow them to roll out programmes for people. We've done well on the capital front in recent years, but the funding for programmes and for people hasn't really matched it. This is the first budget where we've seen a substantial increase for the core funding for the national governing bodies, and that will augur well for on-the-ground programmes and the rolling out of those programmes, whether it's through development officers or whether it's through other means. But that is something that's very encouraging to see, and if we can keep that momentum going now, it will see more people on the ground trying to get more people active in sport. And the other thing in relation to the local authorities, one of the core principles of the new policy is to see local authorities taking on a more proactive role in relation to involving people in sport. We've seen, I suppose, if you want to compare the tourism side of the house to sport, we've seen a delegation of duty there to tourism, on the tourism front to local authorities in recent years, and I think it's worked well in most cases, and it's a ground-up approach. We want to see local authorities getting more involved as well with local authority plans, working also though as well with the local sports partnerships, who have an excellent knowledge on the ground of the issues and the challenges, but also as well in relation to those parts of the community where participation is lower than the national average and where we need to work on. So it's something I actually very much welcome local authority involvement, and the policy hopes to see more of that, but also in a structured way, in an integrated way, and that is something that I think will be very, very important in terms of leading this forward, and those local authorities working with the various organisations and clubs in their areas to try to roll out programmes that currently aren't there, and to make the most of the facilities as well that are there. And that is something that we hope to see by next year. A lot of progress on is a local authority-led audit of sports facilities around the country as well, to see where we have facilities in abundance, but also where we're lacking, and to see how we can best address where there are gaps, and we can adjust policy based on the outcomes of that then as well. And I think that's kind of a lot of the area there covered. The large-scale sporting infrastructure fund, it is a new fund. It's an exciting one because to date projects of that nature have been planned on a kind of an ad hoc basis really, whereas this is giving structure to that planning process, and it's one that has taken a lot longer than we had initially hoped to actually get ready to open, but we're very hopeful of opening it in the very, very near future. And it's something again that I know there is massive demand for, because there's a pent-up demand there from a number of years where that type of level of funding just wasn't available. In relation to governance, we have a bit of ground to make up on that, but we are making good progress on it, and Sport Ireland are very, very enthusiastic and very passionate about ensuring that we get the best levels of governance across all of our NGBs and all the agencies. So far 16 bodies have fully adopted the governance code, and of that you have 12 NGBs, 3 local sports partnerships, and 1 other, and but we have a lot to do, but we anticipate that by 2021 we're looking at what, let me see, percentages wise, this is 16 out of 76. Yeah, we're on around the 20% mark, but by 2021 we expect to have the further 60 in line as well. So look, one thing I suppose that's one positive maybe that came out of the whole Rio saga is that it cast an eye on overall governance issues, and maybe was a catalyst for change that might have taken a lot more time to come about otherwise. So that's something that's positive. And look, there is a very good working relationship between Sport Ireland and the national governing bodies of sport and the federation there in terms of moving this agenda forward and trying to get everything in line there. I think that covers a lot of the areas there.
Yeah. I think you responded to most of them. Yes, I endorse what the Minister of State said there about Rio was a catalyst for many gaps in our corporate governance, and I think it's forced everybody to look at themselves and to comply with the rules, the new rules which are coming into force. On the on the large-scale sports infrastructure fund, you asked why it was taking so long. I think it'll be. There's no real reason except that we wanted to get it absolutely right, and secondly, we didn't want to. We want to put a bit of space between that and the sports capital programme. I think it'll be announced by Monday, Tuesday. I mean, don't hold me that. It might be before that. We might be able to do it on Friday. But it's absolutely imminent, and that's going to be a very exciting prospect. It's obviously filling an enormous gap which the SCP doesn't fill, and we're anticipating that there'll be huge oversubscription for that particular fund, but it will be done in an extremely fair, very transparent way, and it will certainly, I think it'll be robust and protect itself from any criticism, in that it will be utterly fair and free of political interference.
Just in relation to Chairman Deputy Munster's, is Deputy Munster coming back, or will
No.
I acknowledge that the committee clashes with other demands as well, but
You can state it for the record.
well, for the record, yeah. Just so she asked first of all about this participation. So I suppose, look, I would refer to Chapter 3 of the policy. There, I think it's 16 pages on participation alone. So I suppose, look, just to summarise, look, what we're hoping to do is, arising from the most recent Sports Monitor, we know that participation rates are lower from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds, and also groups like people with disabilities. So we're specifically trying to target those areas with a very comprehensive approach led by numerous agencies, the national governing bodies, the local sports partnerships who already operate in that sphere, and also now the local authorities as well, and a collaborative approach across all agencies. And of course, as well, working with schools, which is really important, which I've already covered, but I would just point to that particular chapter, which gives a very comprehensive outlook of how we're planning to do that. And then, in relation to the Sports Capital Programme, I get a little bit frustrated at times when I hear the programme being criticised for not focusing enough on disadvantage. The reality is that actually over 50% of all funding that was allocated in the most recent programme in 2017 was towards areas of disadvantage. And what we're doing at the moment is we are looking at how we can adjust the scoring system even further and weight it even more heavily towards areas of disadvantage and applications from disadvantaged areas. And that's something that I think is very positive. But we've already been very heavily weighting a pro-disadvantage scenario in the Sports Capital Programme.
I suppose, Minister, when you go to the disadvantage, one of the initial handicaps you have straight away is you don't have any property or land. Straight away, they're at a disadvantage.
Yeah,
from that
so
point.
that's why.
Is there any way that issue could be overcome in disadvantage?
So a number of things we've done to address that is, number one, we've increased the amount of funding available for equipment only to €50,000 from 25,000. So, for example, if someone doesn't have ownership of a facility, they can still apply under that category, which is something that is very useful for many people, and as well for some of the minority sports. Maybe, for example, rowing. A lot of rowing clubs wouldn't actually own property as such, but would be using rivers or lakes. So, for example, being able to not having a facility would perhaps preclude them, but if you can apply for equipment only and not actually have a facility as such in your ownership, but you have the use of a natural amenity, that's something that, for example, is a very positive thing. And that cap has gone up to 50,000 now, which is a help.
And I welcome that, but if the natural amenity is not there, like, where people need a playground, or a major community, they have no football pitch.
Yeah.
And it's a disadvantage.
So,
you don't have resources if you go about buying the ground, not to mind building
local authorities, for example, can apply for the Sports Capital Programme, and that is an area that we have encouraged that ETBs can apply, for example. So that's an area that is already covered in terms of that element. What I would say is that we could go into the business of financing purchase of land. But I think that, and this was discussed in the context as far back as 2012, I think, when the programme was being reintroduced. I remember this discussion taking place. A number of caveats there is, number one, straight away, you could lead to price inflation for facilities when you know that a government grant is available to purchase. And number two, I think all of a sudden you get into a whole new territory in terms of where you're going with sports capital, and you then not only buy it, but you also have to develop it. So there is, you know, it's a very, very different area when we know that there's a lot of land already in ownership of agencies that isn't being used at all for any purpose. That we you know, really, I think, in terms of local authorities, for example, you know, we need our agencies, local authorities, to be as resourceful as possible with assets that they already have, and they are open. You know, the programme is open to them. Deputy Munster also asked about the scoring system. So we published the scoring system from the last round, and we are currently working in finalising the detail of the current scoring system. We want to try to be as fair as we can possibly be to anyone. And can I just say, in relation to the 2017 programme, I think it's the first time ever that the Sports Capital programme was based, and the funding that was announced was directly proportionate to the scores achieved by the applicants. And in relation to minority sports, the Sports Capital programme was open to everybody to apply for, and for the first time ever, every valid applicant got funding. So there was no exclusion of minority sports or smaller sporting bodies. Everyone who applied and who got a score got funding. It varied from county to county because of the per capita per county system. So someone who got 80 points in Leitrim wouldn't have been getting the same amount as someone who got 80 points in Cork. That's perhaps one of the flaws of the programme. And as we strengthen the scoring system, maybe that's something that we can review. But you know, that is the 2017 programme. That's something that I'm very proud of. That we have a very, very transparent and accountable system in place since this most recent programme. And then the final question that Deputy Munster asked was in relation to sorry, I can't read my own writing here.
Okay,
maybe Minister Ross might
no, I think you've covered all that particularly well. Maybe I'll just go on to Deputy Senator Fionn's questions.
Okay.
Yeah, Senator Fionn, I'm well aware, and I like to pay tribute to the fact that you've for a long time been pursuing this objective of all-island sports and Commonwealth Games, and I think it's a very worthy one, and I think it's something which we should address in the context of the fact that Ireland is now becoming more and more a centre of sporting activity globally. And I'm not saying that we suddenly offer to host a lot of things, but as you'd be aware, there are talks going on about the possibility of hosting the Ryder Cup in 2006. There are other focal points for sport in soccer in terms of Euro 2020 games, and there's even talk of us cooperating with the UK for 2030 for the World Cup. So I mean, we are moving into the international sphere and thinking more globally, and thinking, because of the great achievements which we have overseas, and thinking more in terms of cooperating with others. And I think, you know, all island sports have worked very well in terms. It's worked very well in terms of rugby, and I think you made a very good case to look at it further if there was. But it is a matter as much, I suppose, for foreign affairs as it is for ourselves. But I'm happy to encourage it in any way which you think is practical, subject to obviously the diplomatic niceties which are involved there, which you more than anybody else would be appreciative of.
If I might come in, yeah, and thank you very much, Minister, for the remarks, because it's something I genuinely feel. Yeah. You know, we play rugby on an all-Ireland basis, and we've New Zealand and Australia and Canada, you know, and you know, we 70% of the people born on the island of Ireland residing overseas reside in Commonwealth countries, and it's something that we deep down we have this instinctive that it's not us. But these, from a legal, from educational, from a political, these are the same fare, 2.4 billion, and we just have this kind of reluctance, and it shouldn't be reluctance. And I think we've come an awful long way, and I absolutely agree with you. The 2020 cross-border between the IFA and the FAI, I think it's groundbreaking. I think it sends out a signal that in the island of Ireland, what you've been doing all along, you know, in the sports campus all along, is groundbreaking. And I think that we need to articulate. And again, I say, what happened last Sunday in the island of Ireland, where we're in Sligo, we're in Dublin, we're in Belfast, and Enniskillen, in my own town of Boyle, where tens of thousands of people went out and rightly remembered the 50,000 Irish men and the 200,000 Irish men who served in World War I. I think we've come of age, and I think we're in a much better space from a historical viewpoint. And again, I say, you know, it was a Fine Gael government. It was the Taoiseach Johnny Costello. We left the Commonwealth in 1949, maybe on a spat because we felt we were insulted by, I think, the Canadian High Commissioner. But I think there's an awful lot to be gained from as I said, sporting links especially, for an issue that we deep down we don't talk about. But sorry for going into that, but thank you very much for your words. And thank you.
Okay. Right. Do you want to make any comment on our chairman, Deputy O'Dowd? Did you have these?
Yeah, so I covered a lot of, I suppose the disadvantage was an area that he raised as well. So I think I addressed that there in relation to the Sports Capital Programme. And again, I suppose to emphasise that we're currently going through the scoring criteria for the 2018 programme, and we will be publishing, as soon as we finalise that, we will publish it as we did in the 2017, in respect to the 2017 programme. We don't do it beforehand because there is a feeling that if we did, you'd get the answers that you're looking for. You know, that ultimately you want to try to get as accurate and as true a portrayal of the situation as possible on the application form, and then you can adjudicate as fairly as possible then by setting your scoring criteria afterwards. If you were to publish it beforehand, you would get exactly, everyone would have 100 marks, you know, and that's not the way we should be doing it. And just, yeah, I mean, he was talking about inclusivity, and that's very much the national sports policy. That we're trying to get up to, you know, 50% participation. We're trying to reduce the sedentary percentage, and we're trying to particularly target, you know, groups that are not as active in sport and in recreation as they should be or could be at present. And it's very much about inclusivity and about funding following disability, funding following disadvantage across the boards. That's what we're trying to do. And you know, just pointing to a number of programmes, he referred to the Park Run. It's a brilliant initiative, the Daily Mile. These are the types of programmes that really are working on the ground, and it's a very much a ground-up approach. I think that is needed, as well as government support in facilitating that. And just to agree with his comments there, with the Chairman's comments.
Right. Just Minister, I suppose, just to go back into the issue about the disadvantaged areas and the involvement of local authorities and the ETB, and I welcome that, but I think it needs to be put out there the public more, the public domain at large. Look, I have come across where my own local authority have helped, in the process of with conjunction with the FAI Ireland doing the Munster youth thing in Glanmire, but I'm talking about local community clubs. I'm not aware that they come to politicians, they come to the local hall giving out that they have no ground for how to get a facility, but when they come, sometimes the local authorities, they say we have no facilities or no land, whatever. You know, I think that something should be made more of that, like, you know, that they are aware that there is a duty in local authorities and DTBs to come on board.
Well, what we do now as well, and I perhaps should have touched on this in my previous answers, you know, we reward clubs who share facilities more.
I know.
You know, so if you're in a license agreement, for example, if you have a club that doesn't have a facility, but if a group with a facility enters into a license agreement with that club, they will score far higher than the club that is just going out on their own and not making the facility a shared facility. That's something that's already in the Sports Capital Programme. Again, we're considering weighting that even heavier in the 2018 programme to encourage that type of facility sharing. And that's precisely targeting the types of facilities, the types of clubs that are without facilities that you're referring to, Chair. And the other thing I suppose I would say is, look, by easing up the criteria in relation to schools as well, again, that is using state assets that are in communities that perhaps are currently unavailable and making them available, and that on top of other state agencies and the local authorities. You know, there is a pretty good menu to choose from in terms of potential lands that may be available. But again, I think if we were to get into the land purchase side of the house, we're into a whole new territory.
But just to give guidance to clubs who...
Yeah, and we've tried to do that by having a pretty comprehensive list of information evenings through officials in the department who've gone around the country, again, as they have done in previous rounds, to make that facility, you know, that information available. But also, you know, the Sports Capital Programme website, sportscapitalprogramme.ie, is a fantastic resource, and I would urge everybody to look at anyone involved in sport to look at that. We have written to all of the main key players in sport throughout the country to make them aware, first of all, of the opening of the programme, but second of all, of the information that is available to them as a resource. So I think, in fairness to the officials in the Sports Capital Unit, I really don't think they could have done any more to make the opening of the Sports Capital programme and the terms and conditions and the opportunity that it presents, make it known to the potential applicants all over the country.
And almost just from two other items or questions, would that be a bit of concern? The spend of money, right, to organisations, that and maybe not so much the hype up, but even that individualised sports, individuals might get priority over team sports, because they might be seen as they have a better chance of achieving the end goal. Would it be a concern, that team sports could play a second role to individuals?
This is general high performance as opposed to capital investment, is it?
Yeah, or even working capital, for the want of a better word,
Well, I mean, Sports Capital, for example, doesn't allow, it only covers non-personal equipment.
We have the policy document, we have the advancing.
Oh yeah, so look, I suppose getting back to my earlier answer, it is a matter for Sport Ireland and the NGBs to agree the high performance strategy and the implementation of that thereafter. And that is something that the NGBs are in agreement with, about, that they want to see the high-performance strategy put in place and administered by Sport Ireland. So I don't want to get into that area. That is technically their area to decide how they do it, who they decide the funding goes to, and where the best prospects are matters for Sport Ireland working with the NGBs to decide on. Look, we have set our targets in terms of what medal count we want to see in future games. We do want to see an increase from what we've achieved in recent games, and that again, the implementation of that, I'm very confident that Sport Ireland, working with the NGBs, will be able to do that. And I look forward, as I said, to seeing work progressing on the high performance strategy over the next 12 months. And I think that is needed. That type of a structure is needed so that we can give a bit of certainty to our athletes, number one, but also as well that we do get the best possible return for our investment. And that return from our investment is brilliant for the national mood, of course, and for pride, but these are the people who inspire the next generation, and there is a circle. If we can pump money in to increasing the levels of facilities available and the programmes available to help people participate and to start off from a young age, there's a higher chance that we're going to have more people making it through to high performance. If you get more people at high performance performing well on the world stage, these people in turn inspire more people to get involved at grassroots level. It's a very cyclical thing, and it's something that we're conscious of, and we are trying to see a trebling, as I said, in that funding.
I know, but I suppose to put it in example context, you have 4 athletes there, 200-metre athletes, right? They're all 4 of them very good. One of them is a great potential individual runner, definitely get a medal. But the 4 of them together have good potential, but not the same potential. That the lower would go towards the individual as opposed to the team. That's
look, you could have 20 members of a panel with 1 medal up for grabs, and but you also have economies of scale as well with team sports, I suppose. So look, they're for and against, in each area, and there are pros and cons. Ultimately, look, I think it'll have to be an objective decision to be made in relation to what our best options are. And again, I think that the people in Sport Ireland have the expertise to try to make the right calls on this, and I would absolutely trust them in terms of doing that, because I think my interaction with them to date has been nothing but really positive. We're very lucky. We have an excellent team there, and amongst the NGBs we have a fantastic resource there as well in terms of sports leadership. I mean, we have brilliant people there. So they have their own sports, of course, at heart, but also I think the overall picture is very much part of their central ethos as well, and that's something I'd be confident that you come to a seamless agreement on that front.
And at the end of the day, you have participants and athletes, you need volunteers, and to ensure proper regulation. Will there be the proper support there for that, for the volunteer regulation, we mentioned the big picture about anti-doping, but even just on the ground, Yeah,
so, I mean, the governance issue is one that is constantly being worked on and improving, but I do just want to acknowledge the role the volunteers play. I mean, we couldn't have sports functioning as we know it in Ireland without the hundreds of thousands of volunteers that we have, day in, day out, week in, week out, giving up their time to facilitate sports for others. And these are the real heroes of Irish sport, but they're the unsung heroes very often. But I mean, we have so many sports volunteers all over the country who do enormous work with people of all ages and people of all types of backgrounds as well. So just want to acknowledge that. And I suppose the sports policy, what we are saying in that front is that we're trying to provide an environment which is as amenable as possible to volunteers and to sports participants, and by supporting them with finance and with better structures and a more collaborative approach and facilities, that we hope to encourage even further volunteerism.
And finally, for board ministers, I look forward to the answer I get here. The sports capitation grant round applications has closed. Any indication of amount of money at the applications in regards to volume of money? Is it oversubscribed by much? Can we give a bit of hope for people?
Of course it is.
50% or 100%?
I was hoping with a 40 million budget we come in somewhere around the 39 million,
yes,
and they'd be wondering what they do with the last million or what we do. But no, that's not the case. I think it's over 160 million. That's
160 for 40?
163. So, I don't know if you're familiar with the New Testament, but there's a loaves and fishes episode in there, and if we could replicate that with sports capital, it would be a very good day's work. We hope to allocate, obviously, as soon as possible. We know we want to try to get the money out to the sporting organisations as quickly as possible, but there's a massive administrative load in front of the officials in the Department of Sport in the Sports Capital Unit at present. We initially have the 2017 invalid applications who've come back in that we're hoping to get done. We'd love to do it before Christmas if we can, but that again, I don't want to be tied to that, because that's dependent on a number of moving parts. But in the new year, then we have the new 2018 applicants, and we hope to be able to allocate there sometime in the springtime. But what will slow down that process is that this time, for the first time ever, before the allocation stage, if an application is incomplete, or if there's something omitted, that the applicants will be written to seeking a correction of that element of the application that isn't complete. And that should hopefully, number one, reduce the number of invalidations substantially, create an awful lot of goodwill, but it will also slow down the process.
Yes.
But I do think it is, if there's one slight omission from a document or one anomaly that can be corrected, or a couple of anomalies that, with a second chance, then we are going to give people that second chance. It's the first time that that's ever happened, and it's something that Minister Ross and I were very keen to see happening, and I think it's only fair to the applicants and again to the volunteers ultimately in most cases who put those applications together.
Very good. No other further questions? Right. I want to thank board ministers for taking time off their busy schedule, and more particularly for launching the National Sports Policy last July, and we look forward to its working. And with this, I conclude the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
John Shinde.